Abandoned Heart. The cold bit through Olivia Preston's thin jacket as the last traces of Ethan's truck disappeared down the logging road. At 30 weeks pregnant, the slight curve of her belly seemed to mock her current predicament. She yanked again at the rope binding her wrist to the pine tree, feeling the rough bark scrape against her back. Tears threatened, but she swallowed them down. "Think, Olivia," she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the autumn air. Just think. It had begun as a weekend getaway to their remote cabin, a last attempt to salvage what remained of their 3-year marriage. Ethan had been spiraling for months, lost in prescription painkillers after his construction accident. The sweet gentleman she'd married had vanished, replaced by someone unpredictable and increasingly paranoid. When she'd found his hidden stash and confronted him about getting help, something in Ethan had snapped. His eyes went cold, distant. "You're trying to control me," he'd snarled, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. "You've always tried to fix me." The memory of his hand closing around her wrist made Olivia's stomach turn. He'd dragged her into the woods, ignoring her pleas, mumbling about needing time alone to clear his head. The rope had appeared from his pocket. He'd planned this. That realization stung worse than the actual bindings. "I'll come back when I'm ready," he'd said flatly. "When you're ready to stop trying to change me." Now, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the forest floor, Olivia assessed her situation. The rope was tight, but not cutting off circulation. The cabin was roughly 3 miles east, but without a path, navigation would be challenging. Her phone was in Ethan's truck. The temperature would drop significantly after sunset, and her light clothing wasn't sufficient for an October night in northern Oregon. She worked methodically at the knots, using her teeth and free hand. After nearly an hour of effort, the rope loosened enough for her to slide her wrist free. The relief was immediate but short-lived. Standing alone in the vast forest, Olivia felt smaller than she ever had. "We're going to be okay," she murmured, one hand resting on her belly. The baby responded with a gentle kick, as if in agreement. Olivia oriented herself using the setting sun and began walking east, grateful for the hiking she'd done in these woods during happier times. She collected a sturdy branch as a walking stick, carefully picking her way over fallen logs and uneven ground. As daylight faded, a new worry emerged. The forest wasn't empty. Something rustled in the underbrush nearby, and Olivia froze, clutching her makeshift staff. A pair of golden eyes reflected in the dimming light, observing her from between the trees. A wolf. Not overly large, with silvery gray fur and an intent gaze. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew enough about wildlife to understand that wolves rarely attacked humans. "But fear isn't always rational. Stay back," she called firmly, raising her stick slightly. The wolf tilted its head, maintaining distance but showing no aggression. After what felt like eternity, it simply sat on its haunches, watching. Darkness was coming quickly now. Olivia knew she needed shelter. The hollow beneath a fallen redwood looked promising, sheltered from wind and partially concealed. She gathered pine boughs for insulation and created a crude nest. As night enveloped the forest, bringing a bone-deep chill, Olivia curled into herself, preserving warmth. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by unfamiliar sounds and uncomfortable positions. Each time she opened her eyes, she caught glimpses of the wolf, maintaining silent vigil from a respectful distance. By dawn, her limbs were stiff with cold, but determination had crystallized within her. Ethan had made his choice. Now she would make hers, to survive, for herself, and for the life growing inside her. The wolf was still there as morning light filtered through the canopy, watching her with those intelligent eyes. Somehow its presence felt less threatening now. "Well," Olivia said softly, gathering herself to stand, "I guess we both have a long day ahead." Of Guardian of the Pines, the second day in the wilderness dawned with a peculiar calm. Olivia gathered her resolve along with handfuls of blackberries she'd spotted growing near her makeshift shelter. The sweet tart burst of juice was a small victory against the gnawing hunger. As she moved through the forest, the silver-gray wolf followed at a consistent distance, close enough to observe, far enough to respect boundaries. "I should give you a name," Olivia said aloud, her voice strange in the forest's quiet, "since you seem determined to stick around." The wolf's ears perked up at her voice, intelligent eyes tracking her movements. There was something distinctly feminine about the creature's graceful vigilance. "Shadow," Olivia decided. "You move like one." By midday, Olivia had established a tentative heading toward what she hoped was the direction of the cabin. Her pregnancy made the journey slow-going, each step deliberate on the uneven terrain. When she paused near a small stream to rest, Shadow approached the water's edge, drinking several feet away. "I don't suppose you know where the nearest road is?" Olivia asked wryly. As if in response, Shadow lifted her head, water dripping from her muzzle, and trotted several yards deeper into the forest before stopping to look back expectantly. "You want me to follow you?" Olivia frowned. The rational part of her brain warned against following a wild animal. Yet instinct, something primal and inexplicable, pushed her to trust this creature. Shadow led her to a game trail, narrow but distinctly easier to navigate than the dense underbrush. The path didn't necessarily lead toward the cabin, but it followed the stream, ensuring access to water. That night, when Olivia huddled beneath another fallen log, Shadow settled closer than before, just beyond arm's reach. The wolf's body heat radiated through the cool night air, providing unexpected comfort. "My brother Marcus will be looking for me by now," Olivia whispered to her companion. "He always checks in when Ethan and I go to the cabin." The words were as much to reassure herself as anything else. In the darkness, Olivia permitted herself tears for the first time. They came quietly, rolling down her cheeks as she confronted Ethan's betrayal. Not just today's abandonment, but the months of watching him disappear into addiction, the broken promises, the increasing isolation he'd imposed. She'd made excuses, blamed the pain medication, convinced herself things would improve after the baby arrived. "I was so stupid," she whispered. A soft whine came from Shadow, who had inched closer. The wolf's golden eyes reflected the sliver of moonlight filtering through the trees. "I thought love meant never giving up on someone," Olivia continued. "But I think I gave up on myself instead." Shadow rested her head on her paws, listening with an attentiveness that seemed almost human. When Olivia eventually drifted into exhausted sleep, she dreamed of running through the forest on 4 legs, powerful and free. She woke to find Shadow standing alert, hackles raised. Dawn had barely broken, painting the forest in misty gray light. The wolf's focus was fixed on something beyond Olivia's perception, a low rumble building in her throat. Moments later, Olivia heard it too. The crack of branches, heavy footfalls. Something large was moving through the forest. Shadow positioned herself between Olivia and the approaching sound, her protective stance unmistakable. A massive black bear emerged from the fog, snuffling curiously. Seeing Olivia, it rose to its hind legs, towering and curious rather than immediately aggressive. Shadow's growl intensified, her body language a clear warning. Olivia remembered the basics of bear encounters: appear large, make noise, back away slowly. With trembling hands, she raised her walking stick and jacket, making herself seem bigger while beginning a cautious retreat. The bear dropped to all fours, seemingly undecided. Shadow darted forward suddenly, nipping at the air between them without making contact, a bluff charge executed with precision. The bear huffed, clearly annoyed by this territorial display. For several heart-stopping moments, the standoff continued. Then, remarkably, the bear turned away, apparently deciding this confrontation wasn't worth the effort. As it lumbered back into the mist, Olivia released the breath she'd been holding. "Thank you," she whispered to Shadow, who remained vigilant until the bear's presence was completely gone. That morning marked a shift in their relationship. Shadow stayed closer, occasionally brushing against Olivia's leg as they traveled. When Olivia's energy flagged, the wolf would stop, waiting patiently for her to rest. By late afternoon, Shadow led her to a small clearing where wild raspberry bushes grew in abundance. The berries were past their prime but still edible, providing precious calories. As Olivia gathered them into a pouch made from her shirt, she found herself talking to Shadow about everything. Her childhood in Portland, meeting Ethan in college, their early happy years, the gradual unraveling. The baby wasn't planned, she admitted, but it felt right, you know. I thought it would give Ethan something to focus on beyond his pain. Shadow watched her with those knowing eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal should. That night, exhausted but better fed, Olivia slept with Shadow curled against her back, the wolf's warmth a shield against the deepening autumn chill. For the first time since Ethan drove away, Olivia felt something beyond fear and betrayal. She felt protected. Lessons from the land. By the third day, Olivia's body had begun adapting to the wilderness. Her movements became more efficient, her eyes quicker to spot useful resources. The persistent ache in her muscles was now familiar rather than debilitating. Shadow remained her constant companion, sometimes leading, sometimes following, but always watching. Hunger had become Olivia's most pressing concern. The occasional berries and edible plants she recognized weren't sufficient, especially with her pregnancy. Watching Shadow hunt a rabbit that morning had sparked an idea. I need to try, she told the wolf, gathering flexible branches to fashion a crude trap. Her grandfather had taught her basic snare techniques during childhood camping trips. Knowledge she'd never imagined would become survival critical. The first attempts failed. The second day of trying produced nothing. On the third attempt, Olivia caught a small rabbit. The reality of taking a life hit her harder than expected. She sat beside her catch, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered to the lifeless creature. And thank you. Shadow watched curiously as Olivia struggled through the process of preparing the rabbit. Her hands trembled, but necessity drove her forward. She used sharp stones to skin and clean her catch, then created a small, smokeless fire using the friction method her grandfather had shown her. A task that took over an hour of frustrating attempts. The cooked meat restored some of her depleted energy. She shared morsels with Shadow, though the wolf seemed more interested in the ritual than the food. My grandpa would be proud, Olivia said, warming her hands by the carefully maintained flames. He always said modern people had forgotten how to live with the land. Water came from streams, purified using heated rocks. Shelter improved as Olivia learned to construct better windbreaks using fallen branches and pine boughs. She began marking trees with her pocket knife, creating a system to avoid walking in circles. Each night brought new challenges, rain that soaked through her clothing, temperatures that dropped perilously low, strange sounds that startled her from fitful sleep. Yet each morning found her stronger, more determined, increasingly in tune with the forest's rhythms. On the seventh day, something unexpected happened. While following a promising trail, Olivia stumbled across another human footprint, fresh, heading roughly northeast. Hope surged through her. She followed the tracks until they disappeared at a rocky outcropping. Hello, she called, her voice strange after days of speaking only to Shadow. Is anyone there? No response came except the startled flight of birds from nearby trees. Shadow grew restless, circling Olivia with apparent concern. It's okay, Olivia assured her companion. Someone else is out here. That's good news. They continued following the direction of the tracks, moving with renewed purpose. By afternoon, they reached a small clearing with the unmistakable remains of a campfire. Recently used, the ashes still warm beneath a protective layer of stones. Hello? She called again, louder this time. I need help! Shadow's ears flattened, her body language suddenly defensive. A twig snapped somewhere beyond the clearing's edge. Who's there? A gruff male voice responded. Show yourself! Olivia stepped forward cautiously. I'm lost, she called. I need help. A man emerged from the trees, mid-50s, bearded, wearing worn outdoor clothing and carrying a hunting rifle casually pointed at the ground. His eyes widened at the sight of her obvious pregnancy. Jesus, lady, what are you doing out here? He asked, genuine concern in his weathered face. Before Olivia could respond, Shadow growled deeply, positioning herself protectively. The man froze. That's a wolf, he said slowly, his hand tightening on his rifle. Don't shoot her, Olivia said quickly. She's been protecting me. Disbelief crossed the hunter's face. Protecting you? That's a wild animal, ma'am. Please, Olivia insisted. She's helped me survive. My name is Olivia Preston. My husband left me here tied to a tree. I've been trying to find my way back for a week. The hunter, who introduced himself as Gerald Fletcher, reluctantly lowered his weapon. That's a hell of a story. My camp is about a mile north. Got a satellite phone there. We can call for help. Shadow remained wary, growling softly whenever Gerald moved too quickly. The hunter kept casting nervous glances at the wolf. I've been hunting these woods for 30 years, he said as they walked toward his camp. Never seen anything like this. Wolves don't befriend humans? She found me when I needed help, Olivia said simply. I can't explain it either. At Gerald's camp, a well-equipped setup with a small tent and organized gear, the hunter contacted the local ranger station. Help would arrive by morning. He offered Olivia food and a sleeping bag, treating her with gruff kindness while maintaining a respectful distance from Shadow, who refused to enter the camp perimeter. That night, despite the relative comfort of Gerald's camp, Olivia slept outside the tent, under the stars with Shadow beside her. It felt right somehow. One last night in the wilderness that had become a strange sort of home. Tomorrow everything changes, she whispered to Shadow, fingers buried in the wolf's thick fur. I don't know what happens next. Shadow's golden eyes reflected the moonlight, ancient and knowing. In them, Olivia saw something she'd been searching for since long before Ethan's betrayal. Her own resilience reflected back at her. The search beyond Marcus Preston slammed his fist on Sheriff Dawson's desk, frustration overriding his usually calm demeanor. It's been 8 days, he said through gritted teeth. My pregnant sister is missing and you're telling me you still haven't found anything? Sheriff Dawson, a competent woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair, maintained her professional composure. Mr. Preston, we have 3 search teams covering the area around the cabin. The dog units are working overtime. We've even got volunteer groups from neighboring counties, but it's 50,000 acres of dense forest, and the rain washed away most potential tracks. Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He hadn't slept properly since discovering the abandoned cabin 4 days ago, Ethan's truck gone. No sign of either his sister or brother-in-law, just Olivia's phone left on the kitchen counter. And still nothing from Ethan? He asked. We've got an APB out on his vehicle. His credit cards haven't been used since last Friday, and his phone is either off or the battery's dead. Sheriff Dawson's expression softened slightly. Look, I've known your family since you were kids. We're doing everything possible to find Olivia. Outside the sheriff's office, the small town of Pine Ridge had mobilized around the search. Local businesses displayed Olivia's photo, volunteers coordinated meals for search teams, and the high school gym had become an impromptu command center. The community's response was the one bright spot in this nightmare. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in Portland, Ethan Preston sat in his car outside his sister Rachel's apartment building, hands trembling on the steering wheel. For 3 days, he'd driven aimlessly, consumed by waves of paranoia, guilt, and withdrawal symptoms. The prescription bottles in his glove compartment were empty now. Without the opioids clouding his judgment, the full horror of his actions had crashed down upon him. He'd abandoned his pregnant wife in the forest, tied to a tree. The memory felt simultaneously alien and viscerally present, like watching himself commit the act from outside his body. Ethan's phone had died days ago. He had no idea if Olivia had been found, if she was alive, if their baby was safe. The not knowing had become its own special torture. Rachel opened her apartment door to find her brother swaying in the hallway, unshaven and hollow-eyed. Ethan? What the hell? I did something terrible, he interrupted, his voice breaking. I need help. Within hours, Rachel had contacted the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Office. Ethan, still shaking from withdrawal, confessed everything. The addiction that had spiraled after his back injury, the paranoid delusions that had convinced him Olivia was somehow against him, the exact location where he'd left her. Sheriff Dawson dispatched teams to the new search area immediately, while arranging for Ethan's transfer to custody. The charges would be serious, attempted murder at minimum. As Ethan was processed at the county jail, the revelation of his actions spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Marcus had to be physically restrained by deputies when he arrived, demanding to see the man who had abandoned his sister. "She trusted you," Marcus shouted down the hallway as officers led him outside. "She loved you." That evening, as a fresh search grid was established around Ethan's confession site, Sheriff Dawson received an unexpected call from the ranger station 30 miles north. "We've got a hunter named Fletcher on the satellite phone," her deputy reported. "Says he found a pregnant woman named Olivia Preston at his campsite. Claims she wandered out of the woods with a wolf." "A wolf, Sheriff." Sheriff Dawson's professional facade cracked for the first time in days. "Did you say a wolf?" "That's what Fletcher claims. Says the animal's been following her like a pet. Ranger Thomas is heading out at first light with medical personnel." The news spread quickly. Marcus wept openly when Sheriff Dawson called him. Search teams celebrated with exhausted hugs. The impossible had happened after 8 days alone in the wilderness. Olivia Preston had survived. Only later would the full story emerge. How she'd freed herself from Ethan's restraints. How the lone wolf had appeared and seemingly adopted her. How they'd navigated miles of difficult terrain together. Some would call it a miracle. Others, evidence of nature's unexpected compassion. A few skeptics dismissed the wolf story entirely. But Gerald Fletcher, who had hunted those woods for 3 decades, would tell anyone who listened. "I've seen bears, cougars, all manner of creatures. Never saw anything like that wolf with the golden eyes. Something special there. Something not quite natural, if you know what I mean." As Olivia slept that final night in the wilderness, curled beside Shadow under a canopy of stars, search helicopters passed overhead, their lights sweeping the forest canopy miles to the south, too distant to be seen from Gerald's camp. By morning, Olivia would rejoin the human world, leaving behind the forest that had both threatened her life and ultimately preserved it. Shadow watched over her, golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, as if understanding that their time together was drawing to a close. Rebirth in wilderness. The rescue helicopter descended into the small clearing near Gerald's camp, rotors whipping the pine branches into a frenzy. Medical personnel rushed toward Olivia with blankets and equipment, their faces registering shock at her condition, exhausted but remarkably stable after 8 days in the wilderness. Shadow had disappeared into the trees at the first sound of the helicopter, melting into the forest like a ghost. Olivia had whispered a tearful goodbye, unsure if the wolf even heard her over the approaching aircraft. "BP is 110/70. Pulse slightly elevated but strong," the paramedic reported as they prepared for transport. "Baby's heartbeat is regular and healthy." "It's honestly remarkable, Mrs. Preston." Olivia barely registered the medical jargon. Her eyes remained fixed on the tree line, searching for any glimpse of silvery fur or golden eyes. Nothing. The reunion with Marcus at Pine Ridge Memorial Hospital was a blur of tears and disbelieving joy. Her brother alternated between crushing hugs and stepping back to confirm she was really there, alive and whole. "We thought, when they found the cabin empty." Marcus couldn't complete the thought. "I survived," Olivia said simply. "That's what matters now." The medical team marveled at her condition. Despite dehydration and minor injuries, both she and the baby had weathered the ordeal remarkably well. "You did everything right," Dr. Westfield told her admiringly. "Most people in your situation wouldn't have lasted 3 days, let alone 8. Olivia didn't correct him, didn't explain that she hadn't done it alone. The story of Shadow felt too personal, too sacred to share widely, though she'd told Marcus everything. The investigation into Ethan's actions proceeded swiftly. His confession, combined with evidence from the scene, left little legal ambiguity. When Olivia learned he was being held at the county jail, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She requested to see him. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, concern evident. "After what he did?" "I need to do this," Olivia replied. "For me, not him." The meeting was brief, conducted under strict supervision. Ethan looked diminished, his withdrawal and guilt having hollowed him physically. When Olivia entered the visitor's room, visibly pregnant but standing tall, his facade crumbled completely. I don't expect or want your forgiveness, she told him, voice steady. I'm here to tell you that I survived despite your actions, not because of anything you did or didn't do. I'm filing for divorce. I'll raise this child to be nothing like you. Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his gaunt face. I'm sorry, he whispered. The pills, they changed me. I became someone else. No, Olivia corrected firmly. They just revealed who you already were. Goodbye, Ethan. She left without looking back, a weight lifting from her shoulders with each step. The divorce proceedings would be expedited given the circumstances. Ethan eventually pled guilty to attempted murder and received a 15-year sentence with mandatory treatment for his addiction. 2 months later, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Looking into her daughter's face, with eyes that somehow reminded her of Shadow's golden gaze, Olivia chose her name, Willow. A tree that bends but doesn't break, that thrives near water, that symbolizes resilience. 6 months after her rescue, Olivia made another decision that surprised those who knew her story. She purchased a small cabin on the outskirts of Pine Ridge, near the forest, but with modern amenities and safety features. When friends questioned why she'd want to live so close to where her trauma occurred, she simply smiled. The forest didn't betray me, she explained. It taught me who I really am. From her cabin porch, Olivia often watched the tree line while nursing Willow, especially in the evenings. Marcus worried about her isolation, but Olivia had discovered a profound peace in the rhythm of this new life, teaching part-time at the local community college, raising her daughter, volunteering with domestic violence survivors. On Willow's first birthday, Olivia took her daughter for a short walk along a safe trail near their cabin. As twilight descended, she felt a familiar presence. There, at the forest's edge, stood Shadow, slightly grayer but unmistakable with those intelligent golden eyes. Look, Willow, Olivia whispered to her daughter. There's someone special I want you to meet. Shadow maintained her distance, watching them with that same attentive gaze Olivia remembered. The wolf didn't approach, didn't cross the invisible boundary between wild and domestic, but she was there, acknowledging their connection across worlds. Some nights, when the moon was full, Olivia would hear distant howling from the ridgeline above her cabin. She never told anyone, but those nights she slept with her windows open, letting the wild song fill her dreams. The forest gave me back to myself, she wrote in her journal, which had become both therapy and the draft of a memoir she was slowly crafting. It stripped away everything I thought I needed and showed me what I actually had. Strength I never knew existed, resilience beyond measure, and the capacity to begin again. Willow grew into a curious, strong-willed toddler with an unusual affinity for the outdoors. Neighbors sometimes commented on the child's fearlessness around animals, the way she would stare into the forest as if seeing things others missed. Life wasn't perfect. Olivia had nightmares, trust issues, days when memories overwhelmed her. But unlike before, she faced these challenges directly, no longer hiding from difficult truths or making excuses for those who harmed her. 3 years after her ordeal, a wildlife photographer captured an unusual image on a trail camera deep in the forest. A silver-gray wolf with distinctive golden eyes, leading a small pack that included several younger wolves. The photo made the local paper, prompting speculation about wolf populations returning to areas where they'd been absent for decades. Olivia clipped the article silently, tucking it into her journal beside the pressed wildflowers she'd collected during her survival. Some connections she'd learned transcended easy explanation. We all have a wilderness inside us, she told a group of women at the shelter where she volunteered. And sometimes, we need to get lost there to find our way forward. Outside her cabin window, the forest waited, not as a place of abandonment and betrayal, but as a reminder of transformation. Olivia had entered those woods as one person and emerged as another, guided by an unlikely guardian who had shown her that sometimes hope comes with golden eyes and walks on 4 paws through the darkest parts of our journey. And that was enough.